Record this because there are some people that are absent. So we'll go ahead and record it. Let's be clear on something before I continue to work on. Oh, it's not showing up. Why not? Is it not on? This turn off. Give me a second. I don't know why this is not working. So I'm writing on here. Hopefully it'll show up in a minute. Someone would like to turn the lights off, or at least half the lights off, please. So you have all your work for the evolution unit. All your work for the evolution unit is due. Oh, there it is. All the work for the evolution unit is due on March 30th or April 1st. Can we stop? Thank you. Focus. Write it down. All right. Due dates are all in Schoology. That means you have 2 full weeks, this week and the week after spring break, to get the work done. All of it, or most of it, is going to be done in class, except for Khan Academy. So you have that much time and actually reading your chapters and Khan Academy, the only things you have to do outside of this classroom. And you have 2 weeks, this week and then the following week after spring break, to get that work done. That's it. That's all the time we have. We have no more time. 0 more time.
Doesn't spring break end on the 29th? It's 1 week and 2 days.
No, it turns out to be, stop, don't say that again. Spring break is not a week and 3 days. It's a week. You have 3 weeks until April 1st, correct? 3 weeks minus 1 week is 2 weeks. So we have 2 weeks to get this done. Is that clear? Okay. Khan Academy, is there a fight out there? Seriously? Don't go out there. So, Khan Academy has been given to you already. You were given it last week. You should have started already. In fact, a lot of it you already did. So, or not. Maybe you waited till the last minute to do everything. That's fine too. That's not my problem. Here's what I've come to a realization. Oh, they brought more? Good. Here's a realization. The lack of preparation and work on your part is not an emergency on my part. Is that clear? Am I making myself clear? Am I communicating that, Jalen? Jalen, you looking at me? Yeah. I'm not sweating it. If you're not sweating it, I'm not sweating it. I'm not doing it. I'm not worrying more about your work than you are. That's not happening. So you got 2 weeks to get this done. And you can get it done in 2 weeks. Now, that's March 1st. So this is one of the assignments that needs to get turned in. And we're doing it in class, as we will continue to do for 2 weeks. All right. So the disorder shown in the pedigree of maple syrup urine disease, MSUD, which is a metabolic disorder that affects the body's ability to process certain proteins. It was named after a distinctive odor in the baby's urine. Actually smells like maple syrup. It's sweet to the taste, too. Remember, doctors used to have to taste urine in order to tell what was wrong with the patient. Look at its color, taste it. There were before chemical tests, yes. Now, how do you think doctors diagnose people? Urine and feces, the 2 biggest tools doctors have. Urine and feces. Obviously, you don't taste it anymore.
No, but like they used to.
They used to, yes. Huh? Yes, of course. They didn't understand that. This is before germ theory. They didn't understand what... Remember, there was a time when doctors thought that the humors were the essence of health. And your dysfunction in your humors led to disease. So there were doctors before there was modern medicine. So in any case, the disorder, what is the inheritance pattern of this gene? I can tell already what it is. Who can tell me what they think it is and why? You think it's B, autosomal recessive. Why do you think it's autosomal recessive?
Because in our second generation, it only went to the sister, the circular woman.
All right, so the one of the sisters had it, but not the brother.
Yeah.
That's not why it is B, though. You're right, it's B. Why is it not? Why is it not A or C or D?
Because we knew that they were recessive. Because if it was dominant,
It-
one of the parents would have.
Exactly. See? Exactly. Perfect. Yes. What she said was, you know that this is recessive. You know that this is recessive because this child has it and neither of the parents have it. In other words, what is commonly said is it skipped a generation. The only way a disease skips a generation is if there's a carrier. Only if there's a carrier, which means it has to be recessive. Because if it were dominant, well, they either don't have the gene or they have the disease. One of the two. Is that clear? This is a basic test. This is a test of your basic understanding of dominant and recessive. If it's dominant, if you have it and it's dominant, it shows up. There's no hiding a dominant gene.
Mendoza,
Yeah.
why can't it be X-linked recessive?
Why can't it be X-linked recessive? This again tests your knowledge of chromosomal inheritance. X-linked would mean what? What would X-linked mean? It came from the mom. Okay, for who? That's only true for whom? No. No. Let's go back. So in X-linked traits, you have mom has two X's, dad has an X and a Y. When they make babies, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw what we have here, which is a square and a circle. When these two make babies, this mother, I'm going to go ahead and use pink for mom's X's. I know it's sexist, but it makes it clear. For the daughter, mom gives an X and dad gives an X. For the son, only mom, the son gets their X only from mom. So mom can only give X's, but all the boys got their X from mom. Is that clear? Okay. So, in order for it to be X-linked recessive, we would expect that there would be more boys than girls having the trait, in this case, the disease, if it were X-linked recessive, correct? There is no evidence on this chart that this is an X-linked recessive trait because we have 50-50 boy-girl distribution. Is that understood by everyone? The other piece of evidence that makes sure that what tells us for sure that this is not X-linked recessive. I'm already thinking when I look at the pedigree that it's not X-linked recessive. But what guarantees that it's not X-linked recessive is that this is a female. How many X's does it have? 2. In order for it to have the disease, if it were X-linked recessive, It would have to have how many X's with the recessive gene? Two. One from mom and one from dad. And so what would dad be?
It have to be recessive.
And so would dad have the disease?
Yes.
So does dad have the disease?
No.
So it is not possible, because if and did you hear what she said? X-linked recessive, dad must have the disease. Why? Not her, not you, Manal. Why must an X-linked recessive disease that's passed on from dad, why must dad have it? It's recessive. Can't he carry it? No, because he only has one X, correct. So if he has the gene, it shows up. Whatever he has on that X, that's what shows up. So you see, there's no disease here. There's a disease here. So this must be double X recessive, which means both of these have to be, or rather double recessive, which means that it can't be X-linked. Yeah.
If Manal was going to be right, it would have to look like the F2 generation in order for her answer to be right. Because there's more males that have it.
Ah, that's good. More males that have it than females. If this was the only information you'd have, that's good. That's what you'd expect. Exactly. But another problem you're going to have, though, is this female. What would not allow that cannot be X-linked recessive because of the F2 generation. Because look, there's a female with it, which means it has two X's with the disease gene, and there's a male that doesn't have it. That can't be, because if that means she got she got the X-linked recessive gene from dad. Dad only has one copy, so he'd have to be diseased. So that can't be. So those are the kind of two things you're looking for. Number one, you're right. You're absolutely right. When you see more boys than girls, you're already thinking X-linked recessive. Good. The second thing you're thinking is, if it were X-linked recessive, then dad and a girl got it, then dad would have to have it. If dad doesn't have it, it's not X-linked recessive.
Be shaded in order for it to be.
Yeah, it would have to be. This would have to be shaded in.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So what if like the first generation, like both the moms and both the dads in the first generation, like none of them was affected. But when you look at the next generation, all the boys have it and only one of the girls. Like, wouldn't that make it so they got it from the dad if all the boys have it?
No, not from the no, not well. There's a trick to this. There are some Y-linked diseases. There are some diseases that are on the Y chromosome, and then only boys will get it. No girls ever. That's only if it's a Y, right? Assuming when we talk about boys and girls, we're talking in this case, we're talking about X, Y, X, X. That's what we're talking about, okay? Gender is complicated, as we know, but this is what we're talking about, X, Y, X, X. Is that all clear to you now? Yeah.
How can you pinpoint whether it's a dominant or recessive autosomal? Like,
As I said, what tells you automatically it's recessive is you skip a generation. Anytime you have two people that don't have it, have a baby with it, either it's a new mutation or it's recessive. Does that make sense? You can't, this cannot, this here, I'll just zoom in. This here, what you see right there, cannot happen unless this is a recessive gene or this is a new mutation. One of the two happen. And this can't be X-linked because then dad would have to be, if it were X-linked, dad would have to be X disease, I should put lowercase, X disease Y, in order for this girl to get X disease, Because mom could be X disease, X normal, right? X non-disease. That's possible, but dad would have to have the disease. And because he doesn't, we know it's not X-linked. But it is recessive. How do we know it's recessive? Because it skipped a generation. What we say is, the way it's said is that it's skipping So it skipped from here to here, it skipped a generation. You just have one example is all you need for that to be true. Are we clear? So if it skips a generation, we know it's recessive, period, end of story. It's recessive because it skipped a generation. Is it X-linked? No. Why not? Number one, not more boys don't have it than girls. And number two, equally important, probably even more important, is that we have examples of dad not having it and his girl have it, which means it's either dominant, which we know it's not because it skipped a generation, or it's not X-linked. So it's autosomal recessive. Those are two pieces of data that tell you clearly it's autosomal recessive. All right. I'm going to leave you to do the next one. How are you guys all finished with all these problems? No. All right. Complete these while I go get the rest of the copies. All right. So the rest of this we're going to have to do. I had to cut out the midsection, and unfortunately we lost the second problem. So we're here in the esports room, so you're going to hear video games in the background. There's nothing else we can do about this. So this pedigree number 2 shows that the inheritance Leber congenital amaurosis, which is a type of hereditary blindness. Individuals with this disease lose their vision during childhood. What is the inheritance pattern that we see here? You guys, what did you see? What clues do you have?
I thought that more boys had it than girls.
Do they though?
More the boys.
2 girls have it, 1 boy? No, the second one. We're in the second one. I'm sorry.
I
So
thought we already
it's autosomal
did that.
recessive because
Well, wait. I'm recording this for the whole class. I know we went over in class, but I had to cut it out. All right. So let's go ahead and state what we're dealing with here. We got. We think it's autosomal recessive. Why do we think it's autosomal recessive?
It skipped the first generation. Neither the parents.
That's it. That's it. Well, that's what allows us to know it's recessive. So skipping a generation. That period. That is what lets us know that it's recessive. Okay? Are we clear on that, guys?
Yeah.
So if you see you, right? I'm talking to you because you guys are actually here after school. So here you see these guys don't have it and these guys do. So that lets you know it skipped a generation, right? So because of that, we're sure that this is recessive. There's no doubt. Okay? Now the question is it autosomal or is it X-linked?
It's
We know it's not Y-linked. How do we know it's not Y-linked?
because it's not more girls that have
because it
it
wouldn't
than
affect the
boys.
girl.
It wouldn't affect the girls, right? Ys would only any disease on the Y is only going to be a boy's disease. Never going to be a girl's problem, for the most part, right? So we know it's not Y-linked. We know it's the question is, how do we know it's not X-linked, recessive? Well, for that, as I said in class, I'm gonna write it out here. You have to think. If you have 2 X's and you have an XY, we know it's recessive. So let's call it little L, big L. Okay. We know that there's 1 girl that has it and 1 boy that has it, and they're both children of people that don't have it. Right. We know that the boy got 2 X's. The boy got 2 X's. I'm sorry, that's not right. The boy got an X and a Y, and the girl got 2 X's. We know that that's what happened. We know one of the X's came from mom. All right? And we know the boy got his X from mom. And we know one of the X's came from dad. So we're sure about that. Everybody okay with that so far?
Yeah.
All right. So if if this were X-linked, now you have to write an if then statement. If, let me just write the if at the top. If there were X-linked, that would mean that the boy and girl had it. We know it's recessive because it skipped a generation. Then for the boy to have it, the boy would have to have the little L. We know, and then the girl for the girl to have it, she'd have to have two little L's. Correct? But if in order to get two little L's, that would mean dad would have to have a little L.
So dad was a carrier. So
Dad can't be a carrier on the X chromosome. Any gene that's X-linked cannot be carried by the male. It can't be hidden.
oh, because if the male has it, it's going to present itself.
Exactly. God bless you. Yes, that's exactly right. Why is that? Because the male only has one X, only has one version of the gene.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I said it repeatedly, but, it takes time to process things. So the dad can't have a little L because, look, he doesn't have it. He doesn't have the disease. He's not presenting. So if he doesn't present the trait, then he can't have the recessive gene, right? We said it was definitely recessive. We agreed on that. And if it is recessive, then it has to be autosomal. It can't be X-linked. So if you see a skipping of a generation,
It's recessive.
it's recessive. If you see that there's a girl with it, there's a boy with it, and the father doesn't have it, it can't be X-linked. Period.
So if a girl has it,
If a boy has it, and the father doesn't, you see that pattern, father doesn't, and son does, then for sure it's not X-linked, because if it was, dad would have to have it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
All right. All right, so we know that it's autosomal recessive. Now, knowing that it's autosomal recessive, we can zoom in here and we can actually label. I don't know if they ask you to do it, but let's go ahead and label each of their genes. If we know that it's autosomal recessive and this one has two little L's, right? These must be two little L's. We agree on that? So this is little L, and so this is little L. And that means they must have gotten an L, one from each parent, right? So mom must have a little L and dad a little L. But they don't have the disease, so what must they have?
A big L.
They must have a big L. They must have the dominant form. This son must have what?
Big L.
Big L. Why do you say little L though?
Because he gave it to his daughter.
That's right. He must have given a little L to his daughter because there's two of them here. Because she has the trait. So now we know that one's heterozygous. This female, now these came together. We know that this lady is also heterozygous, don't we? Because again, this daughter got one little L from mom and one from dad. Well, what about this one? We know this one's big L. Do we know what the other one is?
No.
No, we do not.
She could be a carrier or she could just be dominant.
That's right. We can't tell. We need to do a test cross if we want to know. All right. So now this person here, we know this person's little L. So we know this person here has the little L. And we know this person has a big L. Excuse me. So we know this. How do I know this person has a little L? How do I know this person has a little L?
They got it from their dad.
Because they got it from dad. That's all dad has to give. And what did they get from mom?
A big L.
They had to get a big L. How do you know they had a big L?
Because mom's not affected.
That's right. So she has a big L. But how do you know he got a big L?
Because they get one from each. So if dad already gave him a little L, that means he had to get the big L from mom.
Why did he have to have a big L?
Because
Because he's not affected. Yeah, that's right. But you have to say the whole thing because otherwise people get confused. So, yes. And so we don't know what mom is, the second gene. Mom could be big L, or she could be big L, little L. We just don't know. Again, they'd have to have more babies to figure that out, for us to figure it out, or we'd have to sequence her genes. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So that's the second one. Moving on to the third one, Marfan syndrome. Look at that pattern, and we're going to answer the same question. What's the inheritance pattern? Provide one piece of evidence, and then we'll consider the numbers. All right.
I think it's autosomal dominant
Why do you think it's dominant?
because it's dominant because it doesn't skip any generations.
That's right. Good. No skipping generations, so that's evidence that it's dominant. It's not nothing's guaranteed until we have corroborating evidence, but it's definitely dominant. So it's dominant, and it's you think it's autosomal. Why do you think it's autosomal?
Because both the
You say it's not sex linked because it will be appearing more in more boys.
That's right. When we look at a pattern, we expect more boys to have it than girls. In this case, actually, it's not even equal. There are more girls in this pedigree with it than boys. So we're going to go ahead and, for now, work on the assumption it's not X-linked. Okay. Also, if it were X-linked, this person would have it, and that means that, and since we're saying it's dominant, that means all his girls would have it. And all his girls do. All his girls have it here. And this girl, though, doesn't have it, but
is that
it's
not his
X-linked.
girl?
This is.
I'm talking about this.
Oh, yeah, there it is. All his girls would have it, and this girl doesn't have it, right? So because of this one, we know it's not X-linked. This actually is evidence that it's not X-linked because he would give, or it's not X-linked. We know it's dominant, right? We accept it's dominant. So if it's dominant, it's not X-linked because this female doesn't have it. If it was X-linked dominant, he would have it. It's dominant, so he would give that X to this female. This female would then have the disease.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if the dad gives it to all the girls, that means it's X-linked.
No, if the X, dad always gives his X to the female. Period.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
Now, all the other stuff you have to figure out. There's no like way to memorize this. You have to figure it out based on what you see, and ask yourself, knowing how things are inherited, what is the evidence that tells me that this is autosomal dominant? What tells me it's dominant? There's no skipping of a generation. What tells me it's autosomal is number one. There's more girls than boys that have it, and number two, I have a male that had a female without the disease. If it's dominant, he gave the X. If it were X, I'm saying if, right? If it were X-linked and it were dominant, then every one of his females all his female children would have it, and this one doesn't. So it's not X-linked dominant.
Okay.
All right. So now we know it's autosomal. And how do I know that both parents are autosomal dominant, right? How do I know both parents are heterozygous? How do I know that? How do I know that they're big M, little m? Big M, little m.
Oh, because
they're both
their children got the recessive gene and they get affected.
That's right. This child has little m, and this child is little m, and this, that's it. Those two children are little m, which means they had to give a little m. Does that make sense?
So the disease is the dominant trait.
The disease is dominant.
Okay,
So you know what? That's a good habit. Write it down. Disease. So the affected is dominant. So the ones that are clear are not dominant. Okay, we're good?
Yeah.
All right. So I know that based on what I wrote here, I know that, let me put a yellow asterisk. Knowing that, I know that each of these is at least one big M, correct? How do I know they're not both big M? How do I know they're how do I know that they're this? Do I know that they're heterozygous?
We know that it has to be heterozygous because if it was homozygous, then all of their children would be affected because they would
Give me
have-
that. That's right. That's exactly. You're so smart. Show up to class. So that's right. These have to be heterozygote because you have at least one child, right? That or at least one child that doesn't have it. You see, this one doesn't have it. This one doesn't have it. So we got they got the big M from dad. Mom doesn't have a big M. Mom, we know, is recessive, little m, little m. Here, dad is recessive. We know that. We know all the clear ones are little m. We know that. So that tells us that all their parents have at least one little m. We know that these people here are heterozygote. How do we know they're heterozygote?
No, they had to, because they had to get one of the big.
Recessive
Right.
gene
We had to
from
get the
dad.
one big M from the affected parent. And how do I know they got a little m? How did I know they have a little
Because
m?
their other parent
Is homozygous recessive,
Yeah.
right? Has to have it because they're not affected. Do you need me for something? What? So we already know most of this chart, right? And if these two parents are homozygous recessive, what are all three of these?
And these are going to be homozygous recessive.
They got no choice, right? Absolutely no choice. So what is it? Consider the children 1, 2, 3. Would you expect any of these individuals to have children of their own with Marfan syndrome?
No,
No, why not?
because all of their parents don't have
Their
it.
parents
That's
not
right.
dominant.
And
That
none of
gene
their
is
parents-
wiped out. This lineage here, no one that is the ancestor that is a descendant of these two parents will ever have Marfan syndrome unless there's a mutation or they marry somebody who has the gene. Therefore has the disease, right? What about this one here, this parent, this child? Do we know what this girl is?
No.
No. We know that she's big M. We just don't know what the other one is. See, so there's two people on this chart that we're not sure what their genotype is. We know that they have a dominant version. We just don't know what the other one is because they could be carriers of the recessive non-diseased allele. All right. Let's move on to the Charcot-Marie tooth disease. Causes motor and sensory neuropathies. That means your nerves start to waste away. Peripheral nervous system by progressive loss of muscle tissue and touch sensation of various parts of the body. What is the inheritance pattern shown? So let's take a look. What do you think?
I think it's X-linked recessive.
Okay, first let's start off with the easy. Start off with the easy, and then we'll worry about the
It's
hard.
recessive
It's
'cause
recessive.
Skips a
Boom.
generation.
That's it.
And then
Hold on. So we know it's recessive. Again, here we have no one with it, and then they have children with it. That means they have to be carriers. The only way you can be a carrier, have a gene to pass down and not show it, is if it's recessive. Why do you think it's X-linked?
Because more males are shown to have it.
More males are shown to have it than females. All right, very good. We'll continue this and we'll publish it before we leave.
Okay.
You can watch it.
Work by tonight.
Sounds good. And keep up with your work. You're too smart to waste. So here's recessive. We have, you see here, these don't have it, and they have children that have it, so we know it's recessive, and we think it's X-linked because more boys than girls have it. That seems reasonable. So let's go ahead and say we know it's recessive. So what's the disease called again?
Charcot-Marie tooth.
Let's call it C, big C or little c, okay? So little c, so these must all have a big C so that they don't have it. We know that. So we can fill in what we know. These all have big C. Now, we know these two people have little c's. How do we know they have little c's?
Because the gene is recessive.
And it's recessive, and they had a child with it, so they each gave a little c to their child. And then all these affected individuals all have little c's. Now the next question is, do we know which means we know this person has a little c. And these people also have little c's, we know. And this person has a little c. And these have to have little c's because they had a parent that had the disease. Do you see that? If this is their parent, they only had a little c to give. They got the big C from mom, but the dad must have given little c. The daughter got little c from mom and from dad. So that's how this makes sense. These we just don't know. We don't know what this person is. It could be little c, could be big C. This is also an unknown. Actually, it's not. Well, it is unknown because we don't know if this person could have had the allele. It could have been either parent could have the allele. I mean, it's likely that this person had it from their parents because it runs in the family, but we don't know if the male, it runs in his family too. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we don't know where they got this little c. We know this person got the little c from one of the parents. We just don't know which one. And we know here, we're not sure what they got because they didn't marry anyone and they didn't have any or they married but they didn't have any babies, and we're not sure about that one because they haven't had any babies yet. So from this pedigree, that's what we know. Does that make sense? So what is the inheritance pattern shown? Recessive and X-linked. Now let's think about this. I made a mistake and I put two little c's here. If we're thinking it's X-linked recessive, that would just be little c, wouldn't it? If it's X-linked.
By itself?
Yeah, why is it by itself?
Oh, because that only has one X.
Only has one X is right. So this only a little c, then a Y. All the males have only one little c, then a Y. I don't know why this thing is acting up, but it's stalling. Little c, and let me erase this. This little c is missing. This one should not be there. That actually changes a lot. I was going off thinking it was autosomal, so let's go back and erase this because that tells us a lot of information. Little c. So if it's X-linked, shh. You're being recorded, and this is going to be published to YouTube. So let's not curse. Little c, okay? I'm sorry, not little c. These distractions are driving me crazy. So here, again, we still don't know. We know this person has a big C, and it's a Y. This is a little cy. This has big C. This female has a big C. We just don't know. We don't know what her second X is because she could have got an X with a little c from dad. All right, but we know mom, one of them gave him a big C. Dad could have gave him his little CX. We don't know. We know this is Y. You know, these dads only have a big X. That's all they have. Because they're dads. So the dads we know are big CY if they're not affected. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Big CY. And little CY and little CY. All right. And the females here, dad gave her a big C. We don't know which one mom gave her. So it's still a question mark. Does that make sense? And this one is big CY. So we don't have to worry about that one. So really we're down to just a couple.
So
One,
all
two,
males will have
three.
big C.
All the males only have one copy, right? And if they're not affected, they have a big C. If they're affected males, they have one little C on the X and then the Y. All right? Provide at least one piece of evidence that to support your claim. Well, as we said, since we're assuming that it's X-linked based on the fact that mostly boys get it, and when we look at it, we see that it's certainly possible. Everything is that it is one possibility that's X-linked recessive. I'm okay with it being X-linked. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So it's X-linked recessive. The dashed line represents a possible union. All right, so you're gonna get this one and this one. Maybe they're engaged or something. Discuss the probability that such a union will result in a child with CMT. Well, let's go ahead and look at that union. So in order to answer a question like that, number one, you'd have to figure out how it's inherited based on the pattern, which we just did. Number two, you'd have to fill in the genotype based on deduction, which is what we just did, right? So now we're going to take this female's, big C, little c, and let me go ahead and put it as an X. X, big C, and X, little c. And I'm going to cross it with, and it's going to be crossed with a, I hate using a cross like that, but okay. It's going to be crossed with an X, little c, and then Y. So you're going to make that cross. And in order to do that, we set up a Punnett square. That's easy. X, big C, X, little c. We have X, little c, and Y. We go ahead and create the square. We have a female that is X, two X's, one little c, one big C. We have another female. So 50% of the girls will have it.
They'll have the gene, right?
Will have the trait, will have the disease. 100% of the girls will have an allele or a version, a disease gene, right? But 50% of them will actually have the disease. All right, and then when we look at the boys, big C, X big C.
That's aiming in. Do the other one. Right click. That might be on the wrong button. Use a different button.
And what we get is X big C, Y, and X little c, Y. So again, 50% of the girls.
Oh! I got one.
No way!
Of this pairing, all right? Because you have a boy that has it and a girl that doesn't. If the girl had it, you'd have 100% of the boys getting it. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
That's what I keep saying again.
So because this is a situation where the girl does not have the disease, she has a dominant version of it, and the dad does not have the disease, so therefore has a recessive version. You get 50% of the girls and 50% of the boys. Do you see that?
You put girls twice.
Oh, my bad. It's very distracting doing three things at once. It's just not ideal, but it's going to have to be. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
All right. But imagine for a second that the boy had the disease, or the girl had the disease, so it'd be two little C's, and the boy was not. did not have it, right? The father didn't, but the mom did. Then mom would give 100% of her boys the disease. All her boys would get the disease, well, all her girls would not, right? Or 50%. Like, let's go ahead and do it. So yeah, if mom had it, so 2 little C's, right? And then dad had a big C. And let me do different colors. Big C is purple. So then big C, dad is white. So dad was going to give his girls a big X, a big C. You see that? Mom will give the little C because that's all she has to give. Shh. Shh. So dad's going to give the big C. No problem. But mom is going to give the little C. Okay?
Right.
So all her girls are going to be heterozygous, but they're no disease. Carriers, right? They're carriers, they're heterozygous. But all her boys, 100%, will only have one of them. So 100% of the boys. Now, why do I mention that? It's not part of the problem. I mention that because I don't want you to get a misunderstanding when you see this problem and you see that 50% of the boys and 50% of the girls get it. That's only true in this situation. If the opposite were true, in the other half of the situations where the male doesn't have it and the female does in an X-linked recessive disease, what we see is 100% of the boys have it, none of the girls. So what you get, if you add them all up, if there's 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, then what you get is 3/4 of the time boys have it. You see that?
Yeah.
Or 50% of the time boys have it, and only 25% of the time the girls are going to have it. Then, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you get it. That's why boys have it more often than girls, in an X-linked trait. All right, let's take a look at cystic fibrosis. It's a disease. Oh wait, we'll discuss the probability that a child will result. We already talked about 50% of the boys, 50% of the girls. So if we're gonna do, yeah. So yeah, 50% will have the disease, whether boy or girl. All right. So just go ahead and the answer to this question would be 50%. All right. Cystic fibrosis is a disease that affects the ability of cells to move sodium across the cell membrane. This causes a buildup in the lungs, resulting in respiratory problems. Ends up people drown to death in their own mucus. It's kind of sad. There's treatment today, so it's improved, but still, it's an issue. So what is the inheritance pattern you see here?
Recessive.
It's definitely recessive. What else do you see?
You can assume it's autosomal because more girls have it.
Okay, so autosomal. All right, so if it were X, could it be X-linked? Here we have a male that doesn't have it and a female that does. I suppose that would be possible, right? If it's recessive. Is there a male that has it and a daughter that doesn't? No. So there's no real... Well, here's a daughter that has it. Yeah, no. Here's a son that has it. No real way of telling, really. Okay. So autosomal recessive based on the fact that we have more girls than boys, and it's recessive because it's skipping a generation. Okay. Is it... and we gave our one piece of evidence, but it doesn't ask you to do that. But you want to go through and write down their genotype. All right. So let's say cystic fibrosis. let's call it CF, all right? Well, let's just call it F because I don't want to write all those letters. So it's autosomal recessive, the disease. So this has to have a big F. And they had a child with it, so they have to have a little f. And here's little f, little f. This male has to be big F, little f. That makes sense to me so far. These people have to be heterozygote because they have a child with it, and who has to be little f, little f. This person has to be heterozygote because they have a child with little f, little f. These children have to be little f, which means this person has to be heterozygote, which this person is big F for sure, this person is big F for sure, this person is big F for sure, big F, little f for sure, right? Because they have a child that has it. So the only real question marks is this child and this child are the only two where they don't know the genotype for. And you see how fast I was able to do that? Mm-hmm. Once you decide what the inheritance pattern is, then everything else fits in. Now, I suggest doing that because it doesn't take that long to do, but also it's a way for you to check and make sure that your understanding of the inheritance pattern is correct. Because if it wasn't correct, we would run into a problem trying to make it work. But we didn't run into any problems because it's probably autosomal recessive. All right? So that's it. There's some more practice problems we'll have tomorrow. They'll get some pedigrees waiting for you when you get back. And, of course, we'll have another assignment tomorrow in class. Again, reminding you, get on it because you got 2 weeks, not including spring break, to get your work done. It's really mostly reading and all that, okay? All right, kid. Good job.